Out of all the Super Bowls that have ever been played, you can make a case that Super Bowl 37 is the most infamous one. It featured a storyline that will have most of you believing it was scripted. This game took place on January 26, 2003, but the significance of this game comes from the backstory, so here we go. The 1990s were a time that saw the Oakland Raiders fall from grace to virtually become irrelevant. After years of struggle and going through multiple head coaches, owner and GM Al Davis decided to hire young hotshot Jon Gruden. Gruden had never been a head coach before, but he had worked his way up the coaching ranks to get to this point. He was the perfect guy for the Raiders.
We're not posing for football cards now, offense. We're not posing for football cards. Let's play with some speed. How about those Raiders, man?
Gruden instantly turned the Raiders around. By year 3, an AFC Championship appearance. Then, the following year, they had a shot at going to another AFC Championship. But then, they lost to the most notorious call in league history.
Lost the football. It's on the ground, covered by the Raiders.
Reviewing the play, the quarterback's arm was going forward. It is an incomplete pass.
That game was heartbreaking, but perhaps not as wild as what happened next. 1 month after that heartbreaking loss to the Patriots, and Al Davis had traded head coach Jon Gruden to the Buccaneers. Following this move, the Raiders promoted Gruden's assistant and our main character of this story, Bill Callahan. Back when Gruden was hired by the Raiders, he had brought Callahan in with him. The two had coached together for years and were good friends. Callahan was basically told to manage the house that Gruden had built. Spoiler alert, it worked. The Raiders, led by their dominant offense, had finally gotten over the hump. They arrived at their first Super Bowl since 1983. Maybe shipping out Gruden and promoting this Callahan guy was the right move after all. Oh wait.
It's first and goal. That's picked up. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Jon Gruden also made it to the Super Bowl. It's the perfect Hollywood script. Jon Gruden facing off against his former team in the biggest game of the year. 88 million viewers tuned in to see how the Pirate Bowl would go down. Unfortunately, the game was a dud. The Buccaneers went on to crush the Raiders 48-21.
And the funny thing about it is the Raiders knew that was going to happen. Jon Gruden, I think, knew that was going to happen.
Here's where things get weird. 10 years after this Super Bowl loss, former Raiders wide receiver Tim Brown suggested on the radio that Coach Callahan lost the game on purpose. This is a bold accusation. It just sounds insane. There is no way a coach would do that to his own team, right? Well, every conspiracy theory has its so-called evidence. So I'm going to give you the story of what went down so you can decide for yourself. But you know what you don't have much choice over? Male pattern baldness. 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. Luckily, we have Keeps. Keeps has revolutionized the way men are treated for hair loss. With Keeps, it's easier and more affordable to get treatment for your hair loss and help you keep the hair that you have. Personally, I think it's great how convenient they are. Keeps delivers hair loss medication right to your door. Prevention is key. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. So act fast. If you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/KTO or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. Shout out to Keeps for sponsoring. Now let's dive into this conspiracy.
And the funny thing about it is the Raiders knew that was going to happen. Jon Gruden, I think, knew that was going to happen.
One of the most critical components to a game is the game plan. A lot of games are won or lost in this aspect. On any given week in the NFL, you have 6 days to study an opponent, install a plan, and prepare to execute. Super Bowl week is different, however. The team, instead of 6 days, now has 13. That means more film study and more fine-tuning to create the perfect game plan. When the Raiders were preparing for Super Bowl 37, Callahan established a game plan that had players excited. The Raiders were one of the better pass offenses in the league, but the Bucs featured the #1 ranked pass defense in the NFL. So Callahan implemented a heavy run-based approach. The quote from Tim Brown was, "We averaged 340 on the O-line. They averaged 280. We're all happy with that." Everybody was excited. But on Friday, just 2 days before the big game, and Callahan changed everything. He completely threw out the heavy run attack and changed the game plan to throwing it nearly every play.
We just felt like it was very unusual for him to make that change.
Why do you think he would have done it?
To be honest with you, I don't know.
Jerry Rice's fellow teammate Tim Brown also said that in his 27 years of football, the coaches never changed the game plan the Friday before the game. As unusual as this is, what happened on Saturday, the day before the game, is just as absurd. Out of nowhere, All-Pro starting center Barrett Robbins snapped. Robbins begged Coach Callahan, "Do not do this to me. I don't have time to make my calls, to get my calls ready. You can't do this to me on Friday. We haven't practiced full speed. We can't get this done." Combine that with not taking his depression medication, and the next thing you know, Robbins disappeared. Keep in mind, the team found this out the day before the Super Bowl. No one had any idea where he was. One of the most, if not the most, important player on this offense was gone. The story goes that he left Friday night, partied all that night and the following day, just across the border in Tijuana. He turned up at the team hotel Saturday night in front of Bill Callahan. He was so messed up that he didn't even recognize his coach. Al Davis still wanted him to play, but he was in such bad condition he wasn't fit to take the field. I detailed more of this story a few years ago if you haven't seen that video. Anyways, to blame Callahan for the disappearance of Robbins may be unfair. Robbins was off his meds and had trouble later on in his life. But let's try and answer the question. Why? Why would a coach purposely sabotage his team in the Super Bowl? As far as evidence, this is the best we have. Here is the highly controversial comment made by Tim Brown. "We all call it sabotage. Because Callahan and Gruden were good friends," the former star said, and Callahan had a big problem with the Raiders. Hated the Raiders. Only because Gruden made him come. Literally walked off the field on us a couple of times during the season when he first got there, the first couple years. Now, it's a leap to say that he lost the Super Bowl on purpose because he was friends with Gruden and didn't like people within the organization. But the following season, if anything, supports this quote.
"We've got to be the dumbest team in America in terms of playing the game. And I'm highly critical because of the way we give games away. We give them away."
The next year was horrific. It went from a handful of players who turned on Callahan after the Super Bowl to most of the team. Charles Woodson took a rip at Callahan, saying, "He's not the type of person you want to be around. He's just really brought a really negative vibe to this team over the course of the season." The Raiders would go 4-12 in 2003, the worst season collapse following a Super Bowl ever. Callahan was fired following the season, and it was his last time being an NFL head coach. Callahan was a douche, lacked people skills with his team, and clearly wasn't fit to be a head coach. But with all that said, it's still a stretch to say that he lost that game on purpose. Callahan denied the whole thing, and multiple players backed him up. After making those accusations, Tim Brown would take his comments back the following day. 17 years later, the only thing that we can say with any certainty is that Super Bowl 37 was a complete embarrassment for Callahan's career and the fans of the Raiders. But the real question here isn't about Callahan. It goes back to that 2002 playoff game against the Patriots. That literally changed everything. The Patriots went on to win their first Super Bowl, Gruden was traded, and the rest is history. That makes me wonder, what if the Tuck rule never happened? Do the Raiders go on to win the Super Bowl that year? Does Gruden go on to be a legendary coach for them during the 2000s? Maybe the Patriots dynasty never begins. Too bad, we'll never know. All due to one unforgettable moment.
His arm was moving forward, or he brought it back. Then I start hearing about a tuck rule. I'm hearing language I've never heard, and I've been in football my entire life.
Yeah, I was throwing the ball. Looking to the left, throwing it, I was going to throw it, and you hit me as I was throwing.
Yard attempt. Season on the line. The kick is away. It is